Good afternoon, guys. Thank you very much for joining the class today. This is the last class and probably the most difficult one. But don't worry, because I'm absolutely positive and sure that we can overcome the obstacles. So let's get started. So last time we saw how we designed the website and how we built up the different components and connected these components. And today we have to do further steps. First of all, when I tested this application a few days ago, I realized in the backend, in the controller, we had to extend the controller, So if you get back to the controller and you see this line, which is the line 22, right? I had to put this line there because our front end is running on the port 4200 and the backend is running on a different port, which is the 8080. And that was an error. And this error just prevented us just to use the two different applications, the front end and backend, in the same time without any errors. So once I put this line there, everything was perfect. So please extend it and save it. And after that, you can start up the backend application. All right, so coming back to the front end here, I would like to talk about the services, the front end service. So we have to generate a front end service first. Since I have done all the steps a few days ago, because I like to be prepared when I come here, so I will just imitate now and repeat the steps so that you can do it yourself, right? Here you can see my app.service.ts file. Here's where I put the code. And here's the app service spec.ts file. This is also generated with the app service together. So additionally, I just created two more test services, but we don't need that. It's just, just to practice. That's why I've done that. Okay, I will show you now how to generate a service, but you have to know that this service, where this service is. So if you see this route, you can see that this is under the app folder. So the service must be put here in the app folder. So let's get to the command line first. And I will stop the application because it's running at the moment. So I will press the Control C and yes. And that's how I stop the front-end application. And right now I will change my folder first to the source folder, the SRC, and then to the app folder. So I have to get there. So basically I press CD CRC and SRC, and then I come to the SRC folder. After the SRC folder, I will press the CD and app folder, and it will take me to the app folder. And here comes now the command we need. We will use the nggs and the name of the service. So it is, let's call it English. So this service is just a test service. It's called English test. Okay. What does this mean? So this means ng generate service. So we'll generate a new service, and the new service will show up here on the left hand side where you see the other services, the app service and these two other services. So let's see what's happening if I press the enter button. I will generate the new service, and here on the left hand side now you can see the English test service spec file, which is a test file. We don't need this here in this course. And the other one is the one which you need. That's the English test service TS. So that's how the template looks like. And then you can input your code right here. Okay, this was just an example how to generate this. As I told you, I have already generated a few days ago. Here is my service, and we will go over this service, what it includes. So the first step we need to do is actually, since we are using a service. By the way, what is this service for? So the service is just to connect actually the backend with the front end, because what's the backend here? Actually, the backend here is the endpoint, right? So we have to call these endpoints, and we will call these endpoints from the service. That's why we have created the service. So as you see here, I use an import statement. Here I need to import the HTTP headers and also the HTTP client. And once I import that, I also have to do another step. So if you come down here to the module, there's the module file. I'll show you here. So I must import the HTTP client module. And once I import this, then there will not be any errors. So I will put this here in the imports, also the HTTP client module, and also here in the providers section. So this module will be here in two different places, in the providers and also in the imports. Okay, that was the next step. So let's get back to the service. And when we come back to the service, in the service, I must declare the different routes which are calling the different endpoints. So first, we are creating an update URL. This is going to be actually for the update. And the URL is this. We get this URL actually from the backend. If you remember, we have created the endpoints, and this comes from the backend, right? Then there is a constructor, and in the constructor we have to do a dependency injection. So the HTTP client is injected here. So the name of the variable is HTTP and the type is the HTTP client. After this, then we will generate our functions. First, we are generating the register function. The register function will be responsible for putting the user into the database, the new user. Therefore, I have to pass in a parameter which is a user type. Where does this user type come from? So actually, if I scroll down, I can see the modules folder. That's a new folder I have created under the SRC, so the source folder. So the way you can do that here, if you right click and you say new folder, then that's how you can generate it. And what did I put in this new folder? So I put two different TypeScript files. That's why the extension is TS. First, I put the user's TS. It's a very simple object. It's actually an object. It's called user. And this includes three different fields: the name, the address, and the email. These are all string types. And the full user is almost the same. There is only one extension here, is the ID, because when we update a user, we also need the ID. So it's not enough if we have only the name, address, email, but we also need the ID. That's how the system knows which user has to be updated. Okay, that's why I created the models and the full user and the user. Okay, if we come back here to the service, then you see I will pass in this user as a parameter. This is the user I'm going to write into the database. The return type of this function is observable. Please look it up in Google what an observable mean in TypeScript. That's a very important element, because there are two elements which are really important. First, the observable. Second is the promise. Yeah, please see the difference. Please understand how we use the observable. You will see here, but this is not the subject of this course to present the observable and the promise, but you will see the usage, how we can use that right here. So in this function, I will create the register URL constant, and this will get the register URL, which is the endpoint URL. And then I can return this post function. That means I will send the data to the database when I call this post. And actually, I will send a user type, and I have to give in here two different parameters, the register URL, which is this, and I also have to pass in the user, so the new user. All right, so you will see in the component file how I will pass this user value when I call this function. So the next one is the update function. I have given the parameter update user, which is a full user. Remember, here we need the ID. That's why I gave a new parameter, which is a full user. The return type is also an observable like here. And then when I call the function, I will call a put function, which means it's going to be an update in the database. The type is full user. I give in the update URL. Why do I need the this? And I didn't need it here. It is because this URL was created inside this function. However, this URL is created outside of all the functions here. So that's a variable. And when I refer to a variable outside of the function, I will need the this. That's why I'm using that. And then I will pass in this parameter update user. Okay, the next one is the get user, when I want to get only one user from the database. We are not going to use this right here. I'm just showing you how it works. So I will create the get user function here and then pass in the user ID, which is a number type, and the return type of the function is an observable. And the endpoint is this one, and that's how I can add the parameter to the endpoint. So this parameter, the user ID, will come here as an end, as a kind of variable to the end of this URL. All right, and then I will call the get function, and I will get back a full user once I pass in the URL here. More importantly, we have the get all users, because we are strongly using this function here in this example. So we don't need any parameters here. We are defining a constant. This is the endpoint URL, which we are calling, and then calling the get function. And here we will return actually an array. So this means this, this means it's an array, right? But what type of array? This array consists of different full user types, which are objects. So the array will include different objects. These are all full user objects. And then we have to pass in the URL when we call this get function. Once we call that, we get back all the users from the database. You will see soon how we call these functions. And the last one is the delete user. Here we need also an ID as a parameter so that the system knows which user has to be deleted. So I have to pass this in right here. Okay, the console log is actually, we write something into the console, an information. So this user ID I want to see in the console, and that's why I put this line here. Where is the console? Actually, the console is in the browser. You will see it later today where exactly the console is. And then I will determine the remove URL, which is a constant, and also the URL for that. I'm calling the endpoint, and then I'm calling the delete function by passing in the remove URL. Okay, that's all you need to do in the service. It seems to be a little complicated for the first sight, but when you practice this, it will not be that complicated. It looks that, but actually it is not that. All right, so the next step is, once the service is done and you made this modification in the module file, then you have to come to the home component because that's our main component. Actually, that's our most important component. And here in the home component, I will show you what I changed. So in order to explain everything, first I have to start up the application. So let me come here and then step back 2 levels. So with the cd dot dot, cd dot dot, and let's start with the ng-serve this application. So I'm just booting up the application at the moment. And once it comes up, then we can see the different explanations. You should see that also in the UI, right? So it's coming up, and now you can see that the application is up, and let's check this here. Yes, it looks good now. So when I see the application, that's the front end side. And now let's see the home component. So what I changed here is actually this one I didn't touch because that was the same last time as well. But the rest here I took out because that code we don't need anymore. These were only hard-coded values and I had to change to this. What I've done is basically I created a cycle. This is an ng4 cycle, a loop. And when I create this loop, which is an Angular loop, it means that here we have a variable. This variable is called the user to list on website variable. Where does this variable come from? It comes from the home component TS. If you check this, in the home component TS, you can see this variable. This is a full user type, so it will include full users, these objects, and this is an array. So that means it might include more than one object. That's why we are using the array. And here I initialize, I give initial values to these full user elements. All right, so if you come back here, so this comes from here, from the TS file. And that means it can include more data. For example, if it includes 5 or 6 values, then we have to iterate through these values. And first we just analyze the first value, then the second value, and the third, and the fourth, and stuff like that. All right. So therefore, we have to declare a variable. With this let, it's a declaration, and then we declare this user variable. So once we go through this with the ng4, the first element comes out of this and goes into the user. So the user will include the first element, and we will take out the name, the address, and the email from the first element. With an object, that's how we can refer to an object field, right? That's why we use the dot here. And then when it goes to the next element, so the next element will come over here to the user. The first will go out of it. And the second element is here. Then we write the name, the address, the email again, right? I mean, with the second user. And then that goes until the end of this array. So until all the elements are listed out. So let's see how it works right here on the website. So when I click on the view all entries, you see here are the entries, right? All the entries which I have in the database at the moment. And why is that here? Because I'm calling this loop here, and the loop goes through all the elements of this array, right? That's why it's happening. Okay, so the next step is if you see the different click events, we have more click events. Here I had to put, these click events, and then you see the set condition true function is called. Then the get user list is called. That's how you can call more different click events, right? And here is the redirect to new function is called with this. And here below you can see also other functions are called. The redirect to update user ID is called, and the set local storage is called, and delete user by ID is called. Yeah, but okay, so once you understand how we put the data here, this data, that's fine. But now you have to understand where we get these functions after the click events and what they mean. We get all these functions from the home component TS file. So at the moment we are in the home component HTML, but we are calling these functions from here. So let's check them one by one. So if you come here, the first one, what is really important to explain is actually then the import statement. So you have to list all the references here, import all the references you are using in your code. So these are here. And then when you scroll down, you can see that here we created the title variable, the condition variable, and we initialized them. So we gave them an initial value. And also the all users, which is an array. That's how we mark the array. And then the type of the array is full user. So this array will include different objects. These are all full user objects. And then we have the user to list on website variable, which is also an array. And this is a full user type as well. And then we just gave it the value right here, an initial value. And in the constructor, we pass in the different dependencies like the user service as a dependency. That's the name of that, but this is the type. The type is where does that come from? It comes from the service file. Here we had the service TS, so this app service comes from there. We had to import it here. That's why it's recognized. Okay, and the other dependency is the router. So the router is also imported, and then when we call this constructor, then the dependencies are put here. The the ng on init function doesn't include anything. We didn't need anything there. And then we have the redirect to new function, which is actually when do we call this function? So if you come back here, it's called redirect to new. So when you come here and we click on this button, it will redirect us to the entry component. That's where we are using that. Okay, the next one is the redirect to update. So, but this is different than the further one. So if you see here, we are redirecting the user to the update component. Okay, that's one stuff, but we are also setting something in the local storage. What is the local storage and where do we need to set this item here? It is because, let me show you where the local storage is. It's very important that when we are here in the browser in Google Chrome and we press the F12, right? This is a developer tool. It's used by developer mostly. Here we have a console. In the console, we are seeing different messages we need, and you will see it later what we put in the console. But we have another one, which is called application. So when you click on the application, you can see the local storage and the session storage. Basically, we can store different values here in the local storage or session storage. The difference between them is that the local storage will include these set values until you delete them manually. However, the session storage will delete them once you close the browser and you open it again. All the data are gone. So it's better to use the session storage here, but here in our example, I use the local storage. It really doesn't matter now. Okay, so when we come back here, we will set a key here. The key is basically this one. So when you come here and you see these keys here, these are the keys, and then there are the values, right? So when we come back, I give the ID as a value here. So I will put this actually into the local storage. But why do I need that? I do need that because when I am here, I'm in the home component. But when I list all the users here and I click on update, I need the ID of this user, the first user, or the second user. It depends on which user I want to update. So therefore, when we jump to another component, because we are now at the home component, we need to take the ID with us from here, because our code knows which user this is. That's how we wrote the code. And now we have to take it over there. And the way we do that is when we click on the update button, we will store this ID. You see here is 25. We store this ID here so that the next component will know which ID we are talking about. He can pull this ID from here, from the local storage. Let's give you an example. Here's Gabriel White, right? And then I click on update. And you see here in object ID, you can see the 24th and 24 and the Gabriel White and all the data you can see here in the local storage. It is because I took it over from the other component to the update component. So, and that's why we can put this information here in the fields, but you will see how. So when somebody asks you why we use the local storage, we are using that because we want to take information from one component to the other. That's why we are using this local storage. Okay, so coming back here, we discussed this one, and now comes the set condition true. It was there last time, so it's just we set the condition to true, and basically where we use that here in the HTML. So that means when somebody clicks on the button, it will be true and the information will be visible. So let me show you this again. This is the website, so nothing can be seen. Once I click on this, it will be true. The variable will be true, and that's why we see, the table right here. So it plays a role there. Okay, so the next one, the delete user by ID. Okay, let me explain this because this is maybe a little bit distinct from the other ones. So here in the delete user by ID, that's how I call this function. I will pass in the ID as a parameter so that the system knows which person needs to be deleted from the database. And then I am referring to the user service. The user service is passed in here, right? So that's how I can refer to that. And I'm calling the user service delete function. So here I'm calling the delete user function, giving in the ID as a parameter. And here comes the strange step. We have to subscribe to that because it's an observable, and we have to subscribe to all the observable to get the value. And once we subscribe, then we will get the value in the response variable. So that means actually when I call the service function, since this is an observable, it will get the response here in this variable. What response? You could ask, because it's a deletion. What kind of response do we get back? We can get back an OK, that the system deleted that user, or we can get back a not OK, that the system didn't delete that user, right? And here what I do is I will put this information on the console. So you see here in the console, so here's the information I want to see. I mean, this is not that information I'm checking at the moment. This is different other information, but it will be visible here under the console. Right. So okay, the next one is the get all user in a list function. It will return the full user type and an array. An array is needed because more users will be in. More objects, more full user objects will be in this array. And then when I call the service and the get all users function from the service, I have to subscribe because it's an observable. And then I created an all users variable here upstairs. Here, this is also an array, and I will put all the values from the response into the all users because it's a global variable, and this will be available also for the rest of the components here. This response only here. and then I will return the value of these all users. So that means when someone is calling this function, we will get back the value of all the users. Here in the next function, I am doing this. Actually, I have determined another variable, this one, the users to list on website variable. It is here. It's also full user type. And here, right here, I am passing. I'm just passing in this value which I returned here. When I call this function, I will pass in into this variable, and I'll put it on the console to see that. Where do I call this function? Actually, I'm calling this function here. If you check that, when I just one more. Okay, when I click on view all entries, I'm calling this function. You see, that's why we see that. So let me show you also in the HTML. So in the HTML, when we call all users, view all entries, then I'm calling the get user list function here. Yes, that's why we need to call it. Okay, so with this, I will view all the users. And the last one is the set local storage. So that I will set these values in the local storage so that the update component can see my variables from the home component. Where do I call this local storage? The local storage I'm calling, let me check, here. When I click on the update button, on the update, everything will be put into the local storage as you saw before. So when I click here in the local storage, you will see these values. All right. Okay, that's what I've done here in the home component TS. You guys should do the same. So try to do it and see if you get any errors and try to fix the errors if you have any errors. That's the home component. Let's see the next one, the entry component with which we can create a new user. So the first important thing is that I had to extend this form. And the basic idea is here in the entry component TS, I am creating here a form, which is an Angular form. It's a reactive form. There are two types of forms in Angular. There is the template-driven form and the reactive form. Here we talk about the reactive form. So in the reactive form, we have a form group. Let me show you here. That's the whole form with these buttons. This is the form, and this is the form control. So one field is a form control, right? So if we come back here, you can see we have the name, the address, the email as a form control, and we have the form group as the whole form, right? Okay, once we have that, we have to bind this form group here in the form, where the form is, we have to bind this to the form. The form is here. That is the form here, and we have to bind to this form field. And then here I'm calling with the ng submit event, I'm calling 3 different functions, but you will see what these functions are. And where the form controls are, here the input fields, then you can see the different form controls like name, address, and email. So you have to put these ones also here, right? And then we are calling 2 additional functions here. And that's very, very important to call these functions. So, okay, so now we will see in the entry component, that what these functions include and why we need these functions. So first, I'm creating a new user variable, which is a user type. So it's an object. I'm calling from the models. That's why I'm importing this user from the models. Here's the models user. And how do I do that? So let's say if I comment this out, let me do that. And then you can see that basically I am getting an error here, right? It's because it's underlined with red. it doesn't recognize that because the import statement is commented out. So what I can do is I click on it, and then you see this bulb here, this yellow bulb. You click on that and you say import user from module, and you click on it, and then the import is there. So this is completely automatic, and then you don't have to worry about figuring out, this different route. All right. So let's move on with different functions here. So we discussed, how you can use the import. So that's very important to understand. And then I have this new user as a variable, and the title as a variable. And the constructor here includes the app service as a dependency. Here's the new variable called registration service, which is a type of app service. I'm bringing it over from the service file, and the router is also dependency. In the ng on in it, I will put nothing because I don't need there anything. And we have the redirect to home function, which is navigating the user to the home component. And here's the key one, the write out. Sorry, that's not the key one. That's only a simple function. I will put a value onto the console with this. And this is the key one, the registration new user. Actually, the registration new user, what does this do? The registration new user function will use this new user object. So it will set the new user's objects fields to the form value fields. So here we get out the value of the form. That's the name value, the address value, the email value, and we'll put this value into the new user's fields. Once we are done with that, we are calling the registration service register function, and we will pass in the new user object and subscribe to that because it's an observable. Once we are done with that, actually we will reset the fields. We will empty all the fields. But let me show you how it works. So here we have the database, and if you check this database at the moment, you can see that basically we have here 4 different records in the database, right? So let me show you 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I want to put a brand new person into this database. So what I'm doing, I will click on the create a new entry. The form comes up and I have to fill this out. Let's say I'm typing in Madonna, right? The address is Los Angeles, right? Okay, and the email is Madonna at, and let's say gmail.com. And then I click on the submit button, and you see now everything is empty. It's because of that function I've shown you, because of this function. So let's see if this data went into the database. So I come back here and I say list all, so you can see the Madonna is here as a new record. So that means it is also here in this database. So when I check out what is in this database, you can see the Madonna is there below on me. So here is Madonna, right? So it went into the database, so it works fine. So let's get back here again. So that's actually the entry component. We have discussed this, the HTML file and the component file and also the CSS file. I'll just put this one item into the CSS. And the most difficult is the update one, because in the update we have to take over all the information to the next component, as I explained before. So in the update, actually the form looks like the same like with the entry, it's exactly the same. I'm calling the functions, but this function is of course a different one, this update user, because in the new user we are not calling the update user function, we are calling a different function. But the form control names and everything, these are the same. Okay, so now we have to just analyze only the update component TS file. So in the update component TS file, I have to use the update service, which is also an app service, and a router. And here in the ng on init, which is an important function because when this component is loading in, actually it gives an initial value to these items. So I have created here some variables like the object ID here and the object and this is the name, object address, object email, and I am going to give these items a value when the component is loading in. So when the website is loading in, you can see here this one, right? So this object ID will take the value from the local storage from here, where we have the local storage from here. It will take the values from here. So that means I am giving a value to all these variables. But why? Because I want to put these values here in the form. So you see here in the form, right? Why? Because here, when I click on, let's say here, update, you see these values are here. And that's where I put the values in, here, when I set the values, the form values. Okay, the form, you know, because I was talking about this with the entry component, and these are only the variables I define. And here, this is only a navigation to the home page, and this is only a write out function when you put the value here in the console. And actually, I reset everything so that the different fields would be empty. So where does this play a role? When I say cancel, right? It must empty all these fields. But I don't want that now. Just let me check with a new entry. So I'm just typing in something like Yahoo, and the address is New York, and the email is let's say Yahoo at hotmail.com, right? And I click on cancel, everything is gone. This is because of this function, the reset form function, because if you come to the HTML and you see here's the reset button, when somebody clicks on that, the reset form function is called. So this function here, the reset form function is called. That's why. And then the update user is the most important because here is where we update the user. What's happening? Remember, here we created an existing user variable here. This is a full user. It's called a full user. And basically, that's where I'm creating that. And then this one should be passed passed into the service function so that it can be updated in the database. So what I'm doing here, here's the existing user, and I'm taking the name property and I'm giving it a value which is the form value. So also the name, the address, the email, and the ID will take the form value, which is already in the form, except for the ID, because the ID is not given in the form. I'm taking this from the object ID from here, because in the object ID at the beginning I gave a value here in the init function. As you see here in the ID, this one took this value here. Okay, so and then finally, when all the IDs are set, then I'm calling the service and the update function, passing in this existing user and subscribe to that. And this will write the update into the database. But let's check it now. So if we get back here and we say view all users, and now here's a short bug. As you see, we'll see what that is, and it's very good that it comes, because in programming you always get a bug, you know, so and you have to fix the different bugs. That's very important. So what I'm doing here, is basically that I want to update the Madonna. So I am clicking on update here, and then right here, actually, I am changing this Los Angeles to, let's say, um, Warsaw, okay? And then click on submit, right? And I'll come back here and I say view all, and you see the Madonna is here. It's updated now. So the new address is Warsaw, right? Okay, so basically that was all here in the component. So because in the component, we have to understand how it works, how this component works. And basically, that was all for today. So I hope you understood the relationship between the component and the service and how it works. And actually, we have finished the course with this lesson. We'll have a short session next time. I will tell you what the solution for this short bug is so that you can see. And now you understand the whole complete processes, because basically when somebody does development, it's not only the development, the development is only one stage, but the next stage is the testing. The testing, you will get a lot of errors. You have to correct the errors, and then once the errors are corrected, then the software can be rolled out and fixed. It's already fixed. So that's how it works in life. That's why next time I'll show you how bug fixing is, and how it works. So thank you very much for joining this class today. It was a little longer and more difficult. Before we finish it completely, I will test the application for you here right now again. So let's come here and view all entries first. Let's refresh it, and let's close this one. Now we don't need that. And then we see view all entries. So we see the entries, and now I want a new entry. So I click on create new entry and I say James, right? And then I will give in the new address, which is let's say let it be Paris, and then this one is Paris at yahoo.com, right? And then submit, right? And then let's check if it's there now. Yes, James Paris, and the email address is there, right? So it's working. And let's see the next one. So the next one is the deletion. I want to delete this empty line. So what I do is I click on delete, and when I refresh here, I can see this line is gone. So that means this deletion works. Let me delete another one. So I want to delete this Mary Wells Johnson. So I click on delete, and then I refresh here, and I can see that that record is gone. So the deletion works fine. And then finally, let's see how the update works. So if I go to Gabriel White, I want to update that. And let's say I want to change this Wien to, let's say, Florida, right? And I click on submit. I'll go back and check. I will see Florida here. So the Gabriel White has been changed to Florida. So actually all the functions that are working we have created. And you see, that's how we are doing smoke test as a programmer. So thank you very much for your attention today. I hope you enjoyed that. And then see you next time for a short time. Thank you and have a nice day. Bye-bye.